So, I think I mentioned in a previous video, just briefly, that I had been asked by the instructor at a local community college here in my home community to give a one session talk on Buddhism to a class on world religions. Actually, there are two sections of the class, so I would repeat this essentially hour and a half talk twice later this week. And I thought I would just sort of skim over some of the content that I thought would be appropriate for this type of audience, which are basically actually 16 and 17-year-olds who are in a program that kind of straddles high school and college, such that they're able to get credit in both institutions as a result of taking these particular college credit courses. And what I'm told is that these tend to be quite bright and advanced students. The book that they are utilizing for this course is Living Religions by Mary Pat Fisher. And I have read the chapter on Buddhism from this volume, and it covers a lot of material. While I might take issue with one or two or three points within her presentation, I think these students have, if they've read this chapter, gotten a quite comprehensive view of many aspects of Buddhism, perhaps even in more depth than that I myself would be able to tick off the top of my head. In any case, one of my thoughts and plans is to pass out 3x5 cards, a 3x5 card to each of these students, and request of them that they write down in legible form one or more questions that they have about Buddhism. I might or might not address one or more of these questions within the class time, but my thought is that that would be something they could give to me that would then be potentially grist for the mill for a future video that I might do in the context of trying to respond to some of the questions of these young students here in my local area. In any case, I will give you a brief glimpse again of the PowerPoint that I'm using. And just FYI, in addition to a PowerPoint, which I'm no expert at doing, having basically an old 2003 Office piece of software and not having had much experience at all doing PowerPoints, but I did create a PowerPoint for this purpose. But in addition, the instructor is going to provide an easel for me, and I'm taking 3 poster boards, one of which has a picture, which I'll tell you, I may or may not tell them, that this is a picture of some of the statues and so forth that are on my desk here in my home office. And what you're looking at right now is that photo, which is basically an enlargement that I got from Shutterfly. From time to time, that outfit, they'll give you sort of free 4x6 photos, as well as a free 16x20. So what I did was I just taped that onto this poster board, and I thought it would be a nice visual for them in an ongoing way until I got to the other 2 poster boards. But obviously, to begin with, our focus will be also now on the PowerPoint. So with that as an introduction, you're looking now at the first PowerPoint. And, I want to make the point, no pun intended, make the point with these students that I am an Upasaka. I think here very often of Charles Luck, the Upasaka, and I'm not comparing myself in any way with Charles Luck, who was a wonderful translator of Buddhist texts, some of which I've recited. But my point is that he, in spite of his deep knowledge of Buddhism, he considered himself a layman. And I, with my much more superficial knowledge, certainly can't claim to be anything other than a layman, a lay Buddhist. And so I wanted to make it clear that I am not an ordained religious leader. I am not a Buddhist monk. I am not a Buddhist scholar. So this is kind of transparency or truth in advertising in terms of who I am. Now, I do have a story, and it's possible that I may, if I have time during this session, this hour and a half session, I may share more about that with these students. But for starters, I wanted to make it clear who I am. So for the next slide, I wanted to give an overview of Buddha Dharma, or the Buddhist teachings. And, these branches, so to speak, within Buddhism, the various schools, are broken down in different ways, in different texts and so forth. But basically, I felt like, from my perspective, I would want to articulate that there are potentially four kinds of schools or major branches within Buddhism. And all of you watching this video are very familiar with these, namely the Theravada school of the elders, or what now, in a more scholarly appropriate form, is referred to, as I understand it, as Nikaya. And of course, the derogatory form of reference to this school is Hinayana, or lesser vehicle, which we see in some of the sutras that were drafted in the early Christian era, some of the Mahayana sutras, when Mahayana was really wanting to make the point that it had something to offer above and beyond what the earlier form of Buddhism did. And by the way, my understanding is the Theravada school is one of, 18 or so Nikaya schools, and it is the one that has survived in terms of its scriptures within the language of the Pali, or referred to now as the Pali Canon. Next, of course, is the Mahayana, or Great Vehicle, and that's the one that I personally most identify with. And then you have the Vajrayana, or Diamond Vehicle, or Tibetan or Tantric kind of school. Now, some put the esoteric school of Buddhism within Mahayana, esoteric being the Shingon, but as it evolved, it really was fleshed out to a significant degree in Tibet. And so, most authors, I think, would refer to this third school as a separate school, referring to it as Vajrayana, or Diamond Vehicle, or Tibetan or Tantric Buddhism. And then fourth, which I'll mention perhaps a little more to the students as I get more deeply into these different branches, that is Engaged Buddhism, which again is relatively recent and is propagated by those who feel like they want to create, I think, a counter to the assertion that essentially Buddhism is an overly passive or overly self-oriented, if you will, although that's certainly an ironic and paradoxical kind of assertion or allegation. But in any case, the idea that, Buddhism is more oriented toward achieving peace of mind rather than really helping with social problems and the like. So this Engaged Buddhism refers to the type, of course, that does involve more getting out into the world and, Buddhists trying to solve problems collaboratively with other religious leaders, and with the give and take of the politics within various cultures. And then with respect to this Engaged Buddhism, I, in the next slide, have a picture of Thich Nhat Hanh, the famous Vietnamese monk, who I would characterize in some ways as kind of having a hybrid form of Buddhism, sort of integrating some of the Zen with some of the other kinds of approaches, but again, essentially developing his own unique type of Buddhism that I think fits broadly within this framework of Engaged Buddhism. Thich Nhat Hanh, of course, probably the second most famous Buddhist in the world in terms of, who people know as being Buddhist. And of course, he railed mightily against the Vietnam War, and actually met with Martin Luther King in the context of King's peace efforts and civil rights efforts, and efforts to alleviate poverty in the United States of America. In any case, a wonderful man. And then I have a picture of Sakyamuni Buddha,